Very pleasant good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Morning Briefing, starting out another week by peeling ourselves off the mat here on this Monday. Jeff DeForest, and I think it's only a matter of time before we're going to tee up a little Mike Lubie Lubitz. Let me just say hello before we get into the matter at hand here. Michael, how are you, my fine young friend?
I am well this morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I feel good. I mean, it was a terrific weekend on the sporting front. And then we had this happen on Sunday at noon after much buildup, and you could kind of sense that we were going to get a little bit of Vince McMahon involved in the college football playoff selection committee's decision to host Florida State, a team that was 13 and 0 during the season, won its conference championship, defeated 8 bowl teams on its way to not only winning against their bitter arch rival who had the jump on them in a game at the Swamp when they played the Florida Gators on rivalry weekend to close out the regular season. They win the right to go to the ACC championship game against the Louisville team that everybody thought had an explosive offense. They win that game with a true freshman at quarterback, a guy that had to be badly impeded by the idea that, hey, I'm a nervous wreck.
Yeah.
Acquitted himself well enough for Florida State to come up with a win. And then we could sense this was happening. We went from wide discussions over the last several years, and it's about to pop its ugly head up again about election fraud. Hey, Rudy, what do you really think? Right? Remember Giuliani standing there? Schwitz is coming down his cheeks. He's got hair color. I mean, it was a sickening scene. And you're thinking, there's no merit to this whatsoever. But we went from election fraud, Lubie, to selection fraud. Because if this isn't a shot right to the face, this is a left hook to the body from Mike Tyson. This is Joe Frazier in the middle rounds of the Thriller in Manila. You could not have beaten an unfortunate hypocrisy even deeper into the hearts and minds of college football fans everywhere than by depriving Florida State after going undefeated and winning their conference championship. The first team ever to be excluded from the right to compete now with a 4-team field. And they couldn't find a way in there. Why? Because Nick Saban started campaigning the week before that. Well, if we beat Georgia. Yep. Now, this is an atrocity on many fronts. And I want to let you expound on it because I don't understand the concept of you meet all the criteria. You have all the credentials that you need to qualify automatically if there are not 5 teams that are undefeated in the same year. You're a Big 5 conference champion, unbeaten, played plenty of credible opposition, won games under the most dire of circumstances, including the conference championship game against a team that people had high thoughts of in the Louisville Cardinals, who had a good season, maybe faded a little bit at the end, and certainly faded in this ballgame to a tough Florida State defense. But how you eliminate them from the competition altogether is an outright disgrace. That the Sankey controlling and the SEC, as soon as Nick started whining, Lubie, did you not see this coming? And the only way to put Alabama into the Final Four was to also accord the same nod to Texas, who had beaten them straight up so that they could stave off that whole thing. How Florida State is on the outside looking in is an impossibility to me and literally a disgrace to all of college football.
Well, that's the funny thing. It's like, okay, so you didn't want to have to deal with the head-to-head thing, but you're okay with dealing with the undefeated thing. Isn't undefeated? Look, I think they should have gotten both of them in, Florida State and Texas, and then you wouldn't have to deal with either issue. You just dealt with Bama, but Bama lost. So there's really nothing to deal with Alabama. They lost the game. But you end up going, no, we don't want to deal with Bama. We don't want to deal with Texas. We're okay with dealing with undefeated. It's like, what? Like Kirk Herbstreit literally said yesterday before it was when he was doing his he's lost his mind. Like he literally is just an SEC mouthpiece.
Is he even starting to look like Paul Feinbaum at this point?
And I liked Herbstreit for a long time. Yeah. Like he was saying a lot of stuff the last week and then yesterday before and then after. I was like, dude, nothing you're saying. You're using arguments for Alabama that also work for Florida State. You're using arguments against Florida State that also get like your arguments don't work. Like, what do you even know what you're saying? And it was like undefeated really doesn't even matter. Who cares about undefeated? I'm like, since when? Like literally, of all the crap every year that they pull.
Ask the 72 Dolphin veterans.
Yeah, but college football, undefeated is a big thing. Like because you rarely go undefeated. The Gators have won 3 titles and never once had an undefeated season. Like going undefeated is not easy. Going undefeated when you go on the road to play LSU, who was top 5, when you go on the road to play Clemson, when you go on the road to play Florida, when you play 8 bowl teams, when you lose your quarterback with 3 games left, when you lose your backup quarterback with a game left, like
a conference title game, no less.
Like that's what like all the things in the past that they used against teams. This Florida State team didn't have. They weren't UCF. This wasn't the American Athletic or Conference USA or the Sun Belt
or
this
BYU.
Was, yeah, like
playing nobody.
They did. You said, okay, you have to make sure if you're in the AC, you go out of conference. They went out of conference twice and played SEC teams away from home. What were they?
Nobody was destroying the Florida State schedule. If anything, it was Michigan that was under immense scrutiny because they played nothing but cupcakes through the early portion of the year.
All year, no one talked about Florida State's schedule until magically now.
Well, and then the other thing that's in play here, which is particularly hideous. I mean, it reeks of Vince McMahon.
It's wrestling. That's what
it is. And the World Boxing Council, where you're just going to fuck with the rankings. You have a team too that wasn't necessarily dependent on one guy. The defense won that game against Louisville. They had nothing going offensively, and admittedly, maybe they would not be as entertaining to watch if this was the case. And they were going to continue to play like that. But was Iowa such a thrilling team to see? They're in the conference championship game against Michigan. So, it's impossible to differentiate. That's why distinguishing which loss is a more hideous loss when you have all of these one-loss teams. I mean, is Georgia's one loss after 29 straight so ugly, so prohibitive that you would eliminate them and drop them from number 1 to number 6? In the rankings, that seems insane.
What's so funny is we get into these things. Well, Michigan and Washington are automatically in. First of all, why? Why were they automatically in? But fine, they're undefeated. So then why is Florida? Okay, so you're not using consistent logic. Well, no one's talking about Ohio State. They only have 1 loss. Yeah, and it was to Michigan, who's now number 1. Like, okay, and it was very close.
A narrow defeat where they had every opportunity to win
on the road, at night. Like
complete lockout too. Nick Saban. I mean, he's going against Auburn. This was a team that was essentially a patsy by comparison to most of the competition that was being faced in these conference championship games. Yeah, and he needs the luckiest play maybe in the history of college football. This was a Hail Mary where the guy actually rifles the ball to the back of the end zone. It goes through 11 defenders and lands right in his hands. Otherwise, they lose, and there is no discussion of this. Although they would have found a way with a 2-loss Alabama team to figure out a way to make them number 2 for the college football playoffs.
All the stuff you joked about like last week, the last 2 weeks.
Yes.
Because they were like 8. They were never even close. They were like 10, 11, 12, 9. And then magically last week they were 8. Okay. When they almost lost to Auburn, a bad team. Auburn literally lost to New Mexico State by double digits, an FCS team. They moved up to 8 somehow still. I was like, wait, what? Okay. Like it was a lucky win that they shouldn't have had. So they're getting credit for that. Okay, good. So if we're Florida State and we win by double digits or 2 scores, if they're getting credit for that, then good for us. We're going to get tons of credit, right? They moved up to 8. It was like, okay, but they're still 8. Like, how do you go from 8 to 4? And you were joking, like, they're going to get them in. I'm like, how do they get them in?
Of course they were.
8.
And the problem you had with Florida State was that if they had Alabama in there, they had to put Texas in because of the head-to-head beating they put on them in week number 2 of the season when they beat them in Tuscaloosa. Think about that. People are throwing like dead muskrats down on the field. Roadkill is being rained down upon the Texas Longhorns and Sarkisian. They're reminding him that he had a problem with alcohol the entire ballgame while they're drinking moonshine in excess. And they still stuck it to him to the tune of 10 points before subsequently going out and losing to Oklahoma. So how can you possibly deny a team that has that big, fat, round number in the loss column that played in a representative conference and played a representative schedule? How can you deny them a shot when you've given, as you say, an automatic free pass to the other 2 teams that were undefeated? Yes, which also had more than their share of times. I mean, if you saw Michigan against Maryland, you weren't thinking, whoa, I mean, this team is invincible. No, holy Bo Schembechler. What are we talking about here?
Michigan against Penn State. The 3 good teams they played, they look like ass. Like whatever Florida State looked like, that's how Michigan looked like against the good teams. Florida State just played a lot of good teams. Like if Michigan played a lot of good teams, they would look like that all year with their starter. At least Florida was on a 3rd stringer by the end of it. Like Michigan is playing that exact football with their freaking 4-year starter.
Is Condoleezza Rice still on the committee?
No, she's not.
Didn't they
She
have
might
like
look more fair.
comedians and actors and
No, it's a bunch of
gymnasts?
old dudes. There's some black, but old dudes that clearly don't watch this. Like you
They
can
showed
see
these guys watching the
bad.
games. There were
It's so
many
bad.
clips on the various networks of the selection committee observing the Michigan Iowa game, which how they didn't fall asleep then. This Iowa team, I mean, just absolutely pathetic. Couldn't score at a Heidi Fleiss pool party, and you're watching that and thinking, well, let's see. You had Michigan favored by 22, and the over/under number is like 34.
Yep.
You're basically telling people that Iowa is not going to score in this ball game. It was almost like backing the New England Patriots yesterday, which how pathetic was that? Really, Bill Belichick, you couldn't muster up one fucking field goal?
No,
One field goal. That's all we needed there to cover that point spread there is the Chargers go on the road and beat the Patriots in ugly conditions. 6-0. How much more of this could Belichick take? Yeah, you really have to wonder, Lubie. You have to wonder how much longer he stands there on the sidelines. He was particularly short, if that's possible, with the press after the ball game, where they said, "Hey, what do you think you have to do to fix this offense?" And he just mumbled. He looked right at the camera and said, "No." that was his answer. But yeah, clearly selection fraud. It's such ugliness that happened on the college football front. The message is particularly bleak, as you're essentially saying that the team doesn't matter. That because we think that only Jordan Travis would give you any kind of a shot against these other teams, that we are going to disqualify the entire organization. And Mike Norvell had every right to be livid about that. One of the ugliest decisions we've seen in the history of college football, which has been guilty of many, many atrocities over the years. Now, had the 12-team playoff been in place, which is going to start next year, which almost seems like too many. As you're asking yourself, do you really need to go down to number 12? I mean, what kind of level of competition are you getting there? But that would have resolved this problem. It was unfortunate that it happened this year, but ridiculous that a team could go undefeated, win its conference championship, do it with a third-string quarterback in the conference title game after having a remarkable season and playing a representative enough schedule to be competitive with any of the other teams and other teams that had incurred losses, including on their home field. That they get hosed and passed over in the chance to play. At least they deserved a shot with anybody quarterbacking. If they had brought back Chris Wenke to quarterback the team, they deserved a shot to show that what they accomplished during the regular season was not a farce, and that was really, really unfortunate. Sad day, although it's not going to really matter much because you would imagine this, Lubie, that as soon as the selection committee rendered this ridiculous decision and then ran out the back door somewhere or into an awaiting van, they probably had to do one of those things like the Beatles had to do, where they went into one van and then just went right through it into another awaiting van that was adjacent to it so that nobody would recognize what car they were in. But you had to think that they got many congratulatory calls from the various networks that were involved in televising these semifinal games, the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl. What is that? ABC and did NBC always have the Rose Bowl? I want to say Dick Enberg was always calling like the Rose Bowl game.
I think Fox and ESPN. I mean, look, there's the two networks that.
Oh yeah, ESPN. They have them all. ESPN.
It's ESPN and Fox. I know have the contracts now. I don't know who has the boy. Fox all year was big time Big Ten.
How many ESPN executives are on the committee? Do we know?
I mean, I don't think they are on the committee. I think they're just in the ear of the committee, and the committee literally did an about face. They've said one thing for the last 10 years, and then the SEC was like, oh, shit, we're not going to have a team in the playoffs. Hey, and they're like, okay, whatever you want, sir. And they did whatever the SEC wanted.
You think Sankey was on the phone with any of those cats?
Oh, yeah, it's clear.
They were sitting around in that room there going, there are those indiscretions with the satchels full of cash that we've given you in the past. I would hate to see those come to light. Next thing you know, boom, Alabama's in for the chance to play for the national championship, and Lord knows they're going to win it, right? I mean, this is it. This is all being orchestrated by Affleck, some sick plot to get Nick Saban another title. And I see, even though he went like 4-18 this year, despite being he was the Sportsman of the Year for Sports Illustrated, the Sports Person of the Year. Deion Sanders, and who's on to talk about this unfortunate circumstance with Florida State today, being a Florida State alum.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Alum.
Mr. Alum, yeah, he's been very tight with the program ever since. But who's on like the CBS Morning News to talk about this? Not Mike Norvell, but Deion Sanders. Coach Prime will be joining us shortly.
That guy knows winning, 4-8.
An ugly money grab, Lubie. An ugly and unjust money grab.
That's it.
I don't know what you do. I mean, do you storm the Capitol in Tallahassee
No,
there?
it just doesn't matter. Like I will college football for me going forward will just be something that I take in passing. Like it's become entertainment, not sport.
I tell you what, there were a couple of good plays yesterday too, and then officiating again in that Kansas City Green Bay game. How is an official looking right at that? It was the receiver with the 9 last names: Sanchez, Santana, Von Schmenk,
Valdez Scantling,
whatever his name is. Or the guy that dropped a touchdown pass against what was that? The Eagles that they were playing against.
Mm-hmm.
And he's wide open again. Same kind of thing. Mahomes hits him or is about to hit him in the hands. He gets tackled before the ball ever gets there. There's a guy with a perfect angle, an official, no flag.
Yeah.
Would have put the ball on the 5-yard line with Kansas City, then a chance to send it to overtime. And you wonder who's going to be the first to sue over inept and apparently blatantly bad officiating that almost looked like bribery was in play. To get Green Bay over the top in this particular ball game at Lambeau Field because they want the Packers for some reason to be relevant one more time without Aaron Rodgers in the league. Yeah. All right, we'll see you next time. A lot of fun being with you. Lubie, you were pretty tempered down here after the psychotic episode we had on another show that we did earlier today.
I actually didn't yell that much there either.
I'm hoping you bring that same passion to our Tony Bruno radio show. You can catch that 10 to 12 on the Tony Bruno Sports Network if you like our stuff. And thanks for tuning in to this edition of the Morning Briefing. For all the people at NoFilter.net, Caffeine TV, for Mike Lubie Lubitz, I'm Jeff DeForest. We'll see you next time on the next edition of the Morning Briefing.